Hi, this lesson is going to be me talking a little bit about the guitar that you're going to be using to learn how to play on. I'm just going to talk a little bit about different aspects that make it easier to do. The first question is normally, should I use an electric guitar or an acoustic guitar? The answer is it doesn't really matter. The electric guitar is sometimes easier to play than the acoustic, because it's normally got lighter strings which make it a little bit easier to push the strings down and sound a note, but an acoustic guitar sometimes sounds a little bit nicer, so it's just really whatever you prefer. It doesn't really matter. An acoustic guitar will sound nicer if it's not plugged in, an electric guitar will sound nicer through an amplifier. So it doesn't really matter whatever you've got or whatever you fancy. It's not too important. Second point is that the guitar should be in tune, which means the guitar will sound nicer. I've got a lesson on how to tune the guitar with an electric tuner, which is worth learning how to do. I've got another lesson on how to do that, and I'll include a link to that below this video. So that's worth spending a little bit of time to practice tuning the guitar. To start with, it's not too easy, but it's well worth a little bit of work to get the guitar in tune. A really important point about the guitar is something called the guitar's action, and that means the distance between the guitar string and the fingerboard. So if the distance between the guitar string and the fingerboard is a small distance, it means the guitar will be easier to play. So if you play a note, there's less distance for you to push the string onto the fingerboard, like to sound the note like that. So if the string's close to the fingerboard, it will be easier to do. So the guitar action is the distance between the string and the fingerboard. If the string's way up here, it will be harder to push it down. If it's closer, it will be easier. So the guitar action, you can have that adjusted. You can get something called a guitar setup done at a guitar store, and they will lower your action for you, which makes the guitar much easier to play. I tend to find a lot of people who start out have got quite high action on the guitar, because the guitar's sometimes not very good, or it's not been very well looked after. So lowering the action's a great thing to do. You tend to find that good guitar players have got low action and beginners have got high action, which is something that puts the beginner at a big disadvantage, and it's fairly easily sorted out, so it's worth doing that. The string gauge is also quite important. The thicker the string, the harder it is on the fingers, so I would recommend having a light gauge of strings. I would recommend to start off with gauge 10 guitar strings. So if you want to change the strings on your guitar and put lighter strings on them, that will make the guitar easier for you to play. I would recommend by asking to buy gauge 10 guitar strings to start with. The heavier the strings, the louder the sound normally, but at the start I think it's worth sacrificing a little bit of volume to make it easier to play, and then once you get a little bit better you can change to heavier strings, which will make your guitar sound nicer. But at the beginning I would suggest going for lighter strings. I think it's kind of a bit sad that most people who start off playing the guitar start off with quite a bad guitar, and that makes things much harder for them, puts them at a disadvantage, whereas people who are better have better guitars. And it's not always down to the price of the guitar. A cheap guitar doesn't always a cheap guitar is not always harder to play. This guitar I've got cost £100, which is fairly cheap, and I've got other guitars that are much more expensive, and the ease to play them isn't normally that. It's not normally that different if it's set up properly. If you've got any broken strings on your guitar, I've also got a lesson for that. I'll include a link down the bottom. Sometimes playing the guitar with something called a capo, which is a capo is basically a clamp that you put on the guitar, and it lowers the action of the strings. So I'm going to do a lesson on how to use the capo to give your guitar an instant setup. The capo changes the key of the guitar, so it changes the notes. But I'll talk more about that in that lesson, so I'll put a link to that down at the bottom. So this lesson was about the guitar that you're using to learn on, and the main factors are really the gauge of the strings that you use, the guitar being in tune, and also the action of the guitar. And just to recap, the action means the distance between the guitar string and the fingerboard. So it seems fairly logical to me now that the closer the guitar string is to the fingerboard, the easier it will be to push down to sound a note. So that's quite important, and that's a bit of knowledge that normally people get a bit later on. So I think it's good to have that knowledge at the start and give yourself all the advantages and make things as easy as possible at the start, and that's what we're trying to do. So this lesson was about the guitar that you're using to learn on and how to improve it and what you can do to make things easier in relation to the guitar.